In the forgotten corners of the American Southwest, where dust devils dance across endless horizons and the sun beats down mercilessly on cracked earth, miracles are rare. But on one fateful evening, when the sky split open with fire and thunder, a poor cowboy named Jack Thornton made a choice that would change everything. What he pulled from the wreckage of a mysterious explosion wasn't human. It was something beyond imagination, a being from worlds unknown. A reptilian creature with scales that shimmered like liquid mercury and eyes that held the wisdom of galaxies. Jack's act of compassion triggered a chain of events that would shake his small town to its core. Within 24 hours, impossible things began to happen. Objects moved without being touched. The sick were healed by mere presence. And Jack himself discovered abilities he never knew existed. This is the story of how one moment of courage bridged two worlds and revealed that heroism knows no species, no planet, no boundaries, only the universal language of kindness. The town of Redemption Falls had seen better days. Once a thriving mining community in the New Mexico territory, it had slowly withered into a collection of weathered buildings and fading dreams. The population had dwindled to barely 300 souls, most of them too stubborn or too poor to leave. Jack Thornton fell into the latter category. At 32 years old, Jack was the kind of man the land had carved into its own image, lean, hardened, and resilient. His face bore the permanent tan of someone who spent every daylight hour under the unforgiving sun, and his hands were calloused from years of ranch work. He lived in a small cabin on the outskirts of town, working odd jobs for the few remaining ranchers who could still afford hired help. His horse, an aging Mare named Dusty, was his most valuable possession and his only real companion. On the evening of September 15th, Jack was riding home after a long day of mending fences at the Morrison Ranch. The sky had taken on that peculiar orange hue it sometimes did before sunset, but something felt different. The air was charged with an electricity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Dusty seemed to sense it too, her ears flicking nervously as she picked her way along the rocky path. That's when the sky exploded. A streak of brilliant light tore across the heavens, brighter than any shooting star Jack had ever seen. It moved with impossible speed, leaving a trail of green and purple fire in its wake. The sound followed seconds later, a thunderous boom that seemed to shake the very earth beneath Dusty's hooves. The Mare reared in terror, and Jack had to use all his skill to keep from being thrown. The object, whatever it was, impacted somewhere beyond the ridge to the east, in the direction of Dead Man's Canyon. A column of smoke and dust rose into the darkening sky, illuminated from within by strange pulsating lights that cycled through colors Jack didn't have names for. Common sense told him to ride into town and alert Sheriff Dawson, but something deeper, some instinct he couldn't explain, urged him toward the crash site. Jack had always trusted his gut, and despite Dusty's reluctance, he turned her toward the canyon. The ride took 20 minutes, and with each passing moment, the strange lights grew brighter. As he crested the final hill overlooking Dead Man's Canyon, Jack's breath caught in his throat. Below him, nestled among the rocks and scrub brush, was something that couldn't exist, a craft of some kind, roughly oval in shape, made of a material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Sections of it were on fire, but the flames burned in shades of blue and green that no natural fire should produce. Jack dismounted and tied Dusty to a sturdy juniper, then made his way down the slope on foot. The heat from the wreckage was intense, and the air smelled of ozone and something organic he couldn't identify, like burnt flowers mixed with metal. As he approached, he heard it, a sound that was unmistakably a voice, but unlike any human vocalization. It was a series of clicks, hisses, and low-frequency vibrations that he felt in his chest as much as heard with his ears. Something was alive in there. Jack circled the craft, searching for an opening. On the far side, he found what might have been a door or hatch, partially blown open by the impact. Through the gap, he could see movement. Without thinking about the danger, without considering what he might find, Jack grabbed the edge of the opening and pulled with all his strength. The metal, if it was metal, was hot enough to sear his palms, but adrenaline kept him going. The gap widened just enough for him to see inside. What looked back at him would haunt his dreams and change his understanding of reality forever. She and Jack somehow knew instinctively it was female, was unlike anything from Earth. Her body was humanoid in basic structure, standing perhaps 6 feet tall, but covered in scales that shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting from emerald green to deep purple depending on how the light hit them. Her face was elongated, with a prominent but elegant snout, and her eyes were large and almond-shaped, glowing with an inner amber light. Those eyes held intelligence, pain, and something that transcended species, a plea for help. She was badly injured. One of her arms hung at an unnatural angle, and there was a deep gash along her side that oozed a silvery fluid that Jack assumed was blood. The craft around her groaned and sparked, and Jack realized it could explode at any moment. "I'm going to get you out," Jack said, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone conveyed his intention. He reached in, and to his surprise, she didn't recoil. Instead, she extended her good arm toward him, her 3-fingered hand grasping his wrist with surprising gentleness. Jack pulled, and she pushed with her powerful legs. Together, they managed to extract her from the dying craft, just as a section of it collapsed inward with a shower of sparks. He half carried, half dragged her away from the wreckage, up the slope toward where Dusty waited. The Mare's eyes were wild with fear at the sight of the alien being, but years of trust in Jack kept her from bolting. They had barely cleared the ridge when the craft behind them detonated. But this was no ordinary explosion. It was a burst of pure energy that turned night into day, sending out a shock wave of force and light that knocked Jack to his knees. He threw himself over the alien woman, shielding her with his body as debris rained down around them. When the noise finally subsided and Jack dared to look back, the canyon floor was scoured clean. The craft was gone, leaving only a circular area of glass sand that glowed faintly in the darkness. He looked down at the being beneath him, expecting to see fear or confusion, but instead found those amber eyes studying him with what could only be described as wonder. She reached up with her good hand and placed it gently against his chest, right over his heart. A warmth spread from that point of contact, not burning but soothing, and Jack felt something pass between them, a recognition, an understanding that went beyond language or species. "We need to get you help," Jack said, though he had no idea what kind of help could possibly be given to an alien being. He couldn't take her to Doc Harrison in town. The sight of her would either send the old man into cardiac arrest or cause a panic that could endanger them both. The alien woman seemed to understand his dilemma. She gestured weakly toward the north, then at herself, then made a sleeping motion. She needed rest, shelter, time to heal. Jack made a decision that would alter the course of his life and the lives of everyone in Redemption Falls. "My cabin," he said. "I'll take you to my cabin." Getting the alien woman back to his cabin proved to be one of the most challenging tasks Jack had ever undertaken. Dusty refused to let the strange being ride on her back, so Jack had to walk, supporting the injured creature as she limped alongside him. She was heavier than she looked, her body density suggesting a biology adapted to a world with different gravity than Earth. The journey took over 2 hours, and by the time they reached the cabin, both of them were exhausted. Jack's small home was a simple affair: 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and basic furnishings he'd built himself or salvaged from abandoned properties. But it was clean, dry, and most importantly, isolated. His nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. He helped her inside and onto his bed, the only piece of furniture suitable for someone her size. In the lamplight, he could see her injuries more clearly: and they looked worse than he'd initially thought. The silvery blood had stopped flowing, but the wound on her side was deep, and her broken arm would need to be set. Jack had some experience with animal injuries from his ranch work, but he'd never treated anything remotely like this. He boiled water, gathered what medical supplies he had: bandages, whiskey for disinfectant, splints made from wooden slats, and returned to find her watching him with those luminous amber eyes. "I'm going to try to help," he said softly. "This might hurt." What followed was a delicate dance of trust and determination. Jack cleaned the wound on her side as gently as he could, using the whiskey as an antiseptic. She made no sound of pain, but her scales rippled with color changes, from green to purple to a deep, dark red that he interpreted as expressions of discomfort. When he began to set her arm, she finally made a sound, a low vibration that seemed to come from deep in her chest, but she held perfectly still and let him work. As he wrapped the splint around her forearm, something extraordinary happened. The silvery blood on his hands began to tingle, then warm, and when he looked down, he saw it being absorbed into his skin, disappearing as if it had never been there. Simultaneously, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd experienced. His fatigue vanished, his burned palms stopped hurting, and his mind became suddenly incredibly clear. The alien woman sat up slowly, her good hand moving to her injured side. Before Jack's astonished eyes, the deep gash began to close, the edges knitting together with visible speed. Within minutes, only a faint silvery line remained where there had been a life-threatening wound. Her broken arm straightened within the splint, healing at an accelerated rate that defied everything Jack knew about biology. What are you?" Jack whispered. She tilted her head, studying him with what might have been amusement, then pressed her hand to her chest. A series of sounds came from her throat, sessa, ra, repeated several times until pause. Jack understood she was telling him her name, or at least the closest approximation her vocal cords could manage. "Sarah," Jack repeated, and she nodded, or made a gesture that was close enough. Then she pointed at him, her head tilting in question. "Jack," he said, pointing to himself. "Jack Thornton." She tried to repeat it, but her mouth structure couldn't quite form the sounds. What came out was something like Jack, but it was close enough. They had exchanged names. It was a beginning. Over the next few hours, Jack learned that Sarah was far more intelligent than he dared hope. She learned quickly, mimicking his gestures and starting to understand basic words and phrases. Through a combination of drawing in the dirt, gestures, and simple demonstrations, she began to tell him her story. She came from a star system far beyond human knowledge, part of an exploratory mission to catalog life in the galaxy. Her ship had suffered a critical malfunction while passing through Earth's solar system, forcing an emergency landing. The explosion Jack had witnessed wasn't just a crash, it was the ship's core destabilizing, releasing energies that would have been catastrophic if she hadn't managed to partially contain it. But the energy had affected her in ways she didn't fully understand yet. It had changed her, enhanced her natural abilities, and through her blood contact with Jack, it had changed him too. Jack didn't fully comprehend this until Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder and projected an image directly into his mind. Not words, but pure thought and sensation. He saw her world, a planet of crystalline cities and vast forests under a red sun. He felt her isolation, her fear when the ship had started to fail, and her profound gratitude for his rescue. When the vision faded, Jack found tears streaming down his face. "I understand," he said. "You're far from home and you're alone." Sarah's scales shifted to a soft blue color, and Jack somehow knew it was an expression of sadness and acknowledgement. "You can stay here as long as you need," Jack said. "I'll keep you safe." But even as he made that promise, he knew it would be difficult to keep. Come morning, he would have to face the reality of hiding an extraterrestrial being in a small town where everyone knew everyone else as business. And there was something else, a growing awareness that the energy from the explosion hadn't just healed Sarah's wounds. It had awakened something in Jack, something that was even now changing him in ways he was only beginning to understand. As if to confirm his fears, a glass on the table across the room suddenly slid toward him without anyone touching it, stopping precisely when he thought about catching it. Sarah made a pleased sound, her scales shimmering with gold highlights. The energy hadn't just touched them, it had bonded them, creating a connection that transcended species and world. And Jack had a sinking feeling that by morning, that connection would become impossible to hide. He was right to worry. As he finally allowed himself to sleep in his chair near the fireplace, leaving the bed to Sarah, he didn't notice the faint glow that had begun to emanate from his own skin, pulsing in time with his heartbeat and matching the rhythm of Sarah's breathing. The transformation had begun, and by dawn, Redemption Falls would never be the same. Jack woke to sunlight streaming through his window and the immediate realization that something was profoundly wrong. His body felt different, lighter somehow, yet more powerful. When he opened his eyes, the world had a sharpness to it that he'd never experienced before. He could see individual dust motes floating in the sunbeams, could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls, could smell water underground beneath his cabin. Sarah was sitting cross-legged on the floor near the fireplace, her injured arm now fully healed and free of the splint. She was examining her hands, flexing her fingers, and watching as small arcs of energy jump between them like miniature lightning. When she noticed Jack was awake, her scales flushed with a welcoming yellow-green color. "Morning," Jack said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears, deeper, with harmonic undertones that hadn't been there before. He stood up and immediately regretted it as his head spun with sensory overload. He could feel the electromagnetic fields from the metal nails in his walls, taste the approaching weather on the air, sense the life force of every living thing within 100 yards. Sarah rose quickly and placed her hand on his arm, and immediately the chaos resolved into manageable input. Through their connection, she was helping him filter and process the enhanced perception. Jack took several deep breaths and nodded his thanks. "We need to be careful," he said. "I have to go into town today. I was supposed to work at the Morrison Ranch, and if I don't show up, people will come looking." He paused, studying his hands and noticing for the first time that his skin had a faint luminescence to it, barely visible in the daylight but undeniably present. "I don't know how I'm going to explain ... this." Sarah made a gesture that Jack interpreted as concern, then pointed to herself and made a staying motion. She would remain hidden in the cabin. Jack nodded. It was the safest option for now. He gathered his work clothes and hat, hoping they would be enough to conceal any obvious changes. The ride into town on Dusty should have been uneventful, but Jack quickly discovered that his enhanced abilities made everything more complicated. He could sense Dusty's thoughts and emotions with crystal clarity, her trust in him, her lingering nervousness about the strange beings she'd encountered, her pleasure at the cool morning air. When they passed other riders on the road, Jack had to concentrate hard to avoid picking up their surface thoughts as well. Redemption Falls looked exactly as it always did, dusty, worn, and barely clinging to existence. But to Jack's new senses, it was alive with energy and emotion. He could feel the desperation of merchants struggling to keep their businesses open, the quiet resignation of elderly residents who knew the town's best days were behind it, the dreams of young people who longed to escape to bigger cities. He arrived at the Morrison Ranch just after 8 and found old Tom Morrison waiting for him with a concerned expression. "You all right, Jack?" Tom asked, squinting at him. "You look different somehow. Maybe it's just the light." "I'm fine, Mr. Morrison," Jack replied, dismounting carefully and keeping his hat low over his face. "Just didn't sleep well. Ready to get to work." But work proved nearly impossible. The first time Jack picked up a hammer and a pound in a fence post, he hit it with such force that the post split clean in two. When he tried to be gentler, He found he could barely control his own strength. Everything felt as fragile as glass in his hands. Tom noticed, of course. "Son, are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe you should head home and rest." Jack was about to agree when a commotion erupted from the Morrison house. Tom's wife, Martha, came running out, her face pale with terror. Tom, come quick! It's Billy!" Billy was the Morrisons' 8-year-old grandson who lived with them after his parents had died in a wagon accident 2 years prior. Jack and Tom rushed to the house to find the boy lying on the floor of the parlor, convulsing. His eyes rolled back in his head. Martha was crying, trying to hold him still. "He just collapsed," she sobbed. "One minute he was playing, the next." "Tom, we have to get Doc Harrison." "There's no time," Tom said grimly. "By the time someone rides to town and brings the doc back, ... He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. The boy might not have that much time. Jack felt something surge within him, an instinct, a knowing that came from the energy Sarah had shared with him. Without conscious thought, he dropped to his knees beside Billy and placed his hands on the boy's chest. The moment his skin made contact, he could feel what was wrong, an infection in the boy's brain, something that had been building for days unnoticed, now reaching a critical point. "What are you doing?" Martha cried, trying to pull him away, but Tom held her back. "Let him try," Tom said quietly. "Look at his hands." Jack's hands were glowing now, bright enough to be visible even in the daylight streaming through the windows. Energy flowed from him into Billy, seeking out the infection and destroying it at a cellular level, repairing damage, restoring balance. Jack had no idea how he was doing it. He was simply following the instincts that Sarah's gift had awakened in him. Billy's convulsions stopped. His eyes fluttered open, clear and focused. "Grandma," he said weakly. "I had the worst headache, but now it's gone." Martha fell to her knees beside him, checking him over with trembling hands, tears of relief streaming down her face. Billy seemed perfectly fine, better than fine, actually. His cheeks had color, and his eyes were bright with the health that had been slowly draining from him over the past weeks. Tom Morrison stared at Jack with a mixture of awe and fear. "What? How did you ... Jack pulled his hands back, watching as the glow faded from his skin. I can't explain it, Mr. Morrison, but the boy's going to be fine now." He stood up quickly, knowing he needed to leave before more questions could be asked. But as he turned toward the door, he found it blocked by several ranch hands who had been drawn by the commotion. They had witnessed everything through the windows. "Did you see that?" One of them whispered. His hands were glowing, like some kind of angel, or ... double quotes, or witch. Another finished darkly. The word hung in the air like a curse. Jack saw fear and suspicion bloom on their faces, replacing the initial wonder. He knew how these things went in small towns. Whispers became rumors, rumors became accusations, and accusations could turn deadly. "I need to go," Jack said, pushing past them gently but firmly. No one tried to stop him, too shocked by what they'd witnessed to react quickly. He mounted Dusty and rode hard for his cabin, knowing that what had happened couldn't be contained. By nightfall, everyone in Redemption Falls would know that Jack Thornton had somehow healed Billy Morrison with glowing hands. And they would want answers he couldn't possibly give. When he burst through his cabin door, Sarah was waiting, her scales flickering rapidly through a spectrum of colors that indicated distress. Somehow, she had known something had gone wrong. "I healed someone," Jack said breathlessly. "A boy was dying, and I healed him without even thinking about it." They saw Sarah. They all saw. Sarah approached him and placed both hands on either side of his face, her alien features somehow expressing deep concern. Through their connection, she showed him images, warnings from her people about what happened when advanced abilities were revealed too quickly to unprepared populations. Fear, violence, persecution. Her species had learned these lessons across countless worlds. "What do we do?" Jack asked. I can't hide this. And I can't leave. These people are my friends, my neighbors. This is my home." But even as he spoke, they both heard it, the sound of horses approaching from the direction of town. More than a dozen riders, maybe 24, their emotions a mixture of curiosity, fear, and in some cases, barely contained hostility. Word had spread even faster than Jack had feared, and now a reckoning was coming. The question was whether Redemption Falls was ready to accept the impossible, or whether fear would turn neighbor against neighbor and transform a miracle into a tragedy. Sarah stepped back from Jack and began to glow with an inner light, her scales taking on a defensive pattern that Jack somehow knew meant she was preparing to protect him. He grabbed her arm gently. "No," he said firmly. "No violence. If we're going to get through this, we need to try understanding first. Will you trust me?" Sarah's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a determined blue-green. She nodded once, a gesture she had learned from watching Jack. Together, they stepped out onto the porch to face whatever was coming down that dusty road. The transformation of Redemption Falls had begun, and there was no turning back now. Sheriff Roy Dawson led the group that arrived at Jack's cabin, his weathered face set in grim determination. Behind him rode nearly 30 townspeople, including Tom Morrison, Doc Harrison, Pastor Wesley from the church, and various merchants and ranchers. Some carried rifles, though they kept them pointed down. Others simply looked frightened and confused. Jack stood on his porch, Sarah slightly behind him, but clearly visible. The sight of her stopped the riders in their tracks. Horses whinnied nervously, sensing something beyond their understanding. Several people made signs against evil, and Pastor Wesley clutched his Bible tighter. "Jack Thornton," Sheriff Dawson said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We need to talk about what happened at the Morrison place. And about ... He gestured toward Sarah. "Her name is Sarah," Jack said firmly, "and she's under my protection." "Protection?" A man named Silas Blackwood pushed forward on his horse. Blackwood owned one of the larger ranches and had always been quick to judge others. "That thing ain't natural, Jack. It's some kind of demon or ... She's not a demon," Jack interrupted. "She's a traveler from another world. Her ship crashed in Dead Man's Canyon 2 nights ago. I pulled her from the wreckage and brought her here to heal." The crowd erupted in a cacophony of voices, disbelief, fear, and anger all mixing together. Sheriff Dawson raised his hand for silence. "Jack, you're asking us to believe in what? Creatures from other planets? People living on stars?" The sheriff shook his head. "That's crazy talk. Is it crazier than what I did to Billy Morrison?" Jack asked. "Tom, tell them. Tell them your grandson was dying, and now he's not. Tell them what you saw." Tom Morrison urged his horse forward, his face conflicted. "It's true," he said quietly. "Billy was having seizures, bad ones. We thought he was going to die right there in front of us. But Jack ... He touched the boy, and his hands started glowing, and then Billy was fine. Better than fine. The headaches he's been having for weeks are gone." Doc Harrison already examined him. "Tell them, Doc." The old doctor nodded reluctantly. "The boy's healthy, healthier than he's been in months. I can't explain it, but something happened in that house. Something impossible." "It's not impossible," Jack said. "When Sarah's ship exploded, the energy from it changed both of us. It gave us abilities we didn't have before. I can heal people now. I can sense things, feel things I never could before. And I think I can help this town. Help us?" Silas Blackwood spat. "By bringing alien demons among us? By becoming some kind of freak yourself?" "Silas, that's enough," Sheriff Dawson warned, but the damage was done. The crowd's fear was crystallizing into something uglier. Sarah suddenly stepped forward, and the crowd recoiled. She held up her hands in a gesture of peace, then did something remarkable. Her scales began to shift and change, and her body started to transform. Within seconds, she looked almost human. Her scales had smoothed and taken on a flesh tone. Her face had rounded, though her eyes still retained that amber glow. She had learned this ability from studying Jack's biology through their connection, adapting her form to seem less threatening. The crowd gasped. Pastor Wesley fell to his knees. "Witchcraft!" he cried. "Shape-shifting demons." Revelation warned us of this, but others saw it differently. Mrs. Chun, who ran the general store, urged her horse forward cautiously. "If you wanted to hurt us," she said to Sarah, "you could have done it already. Why hide? Why make yourself look more like us if you're evil?" Sarah couldn't speak English yet, but she understood enough. She placed her hand over her heart and then gestured toward the town, a universal sign of peaceful intention. "She means no harm," Jack translated. "Neither do I, but I understand you're all afraid. You should be. Everything you thought you knew about the world has just been challenged. But I'm asking you to choose curiosity over fear. Choose understanding over violence." "Easy words," Silas sneered. "But how do we know this isn't some trick? How do we know there aren't more of these creatures coming? Maybe that crash was the start of an invasion." Before Jack could respond, young Billy Morrison came riding up on a pony, having followed the adults from his grandparents' ranch. His grandmother's voice calling after him echoed in the distance, but the boy had made it to the cabin. "That's enough, Mr. Blackwood," Billy shouted with the fearless righteousness of a child. "Jack saved my life. And if Miss Sarah's his friend, then she's my friend too." He dismounted and walked straight up to the porch, past all the adults, and offered Sarah his hand. The entire crowd held its breath. Sarah looked down at the small boy, her eyes showing emotion that transcended species. She knelt down to his level and gently shook his hand. Her scales rippled through a soft rainbow of colors, and somehow everyone understood it was an expression of joy and gratitude. Billy turned to the crowd. "See? She's nice. Why are you all being so mean?" Out of the mouths of babes, the child's simple act of bravery and kindness cracked something in the crowd's fear. Martha Morrison had arrived and was trying to pull Billy back, but Tom stopped her. "Maybe the boy's right," Tom said. "Maybe we're letting fear blind us to what's really happening here. Jack Thornton has lived among us for 10 years. He's worked our ranches, helped our families, never asked for anything he hadn't earned. That doesn't change just because he's different now. But what happens next?" Sheriff Dawson asked, and it was a genuine question, not an accusation. "Jack, even if we accept this, even if we welcome Sarah into our community, what about the government? The army? If word gets out that there's an alien being Redemption Falls, they'll come. They'll take her. They might take you too." Jack hadn't thought that far ahead, but he realized the sheriff was right. They were sitting on a secret that could destroy all of their lives if it spread beyond the town. "Then we don't let word get out," Mrs. Chun said firmly. "This town has kept secrets before. Remember when the Johnson boys accidentally diverted the creek and flooded the Patterson farm? We all agreed it was heavy rain. Remember when Pastor Wesley's brother hid out here after that bank robbery in Santa Fe, and we swore he'd never pass through? We protected him until the truth came out about the real robbers." "This is different, May," the sheriff protested. This is the same," she interrupted. "This is about protecting one of our own. Jack is one of us. And if Sarah means him no harm, then she's under our protection too." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jack could feel the tide shifting, the fear transmuting into something else, a stubborn determination that was characteristic of frontier communities. They might not understand what Sarah was or how Jack had changed, but they understood loyalty. Silas Blackwood wasn't convinced. "You're all fools," he snarled. "When soldiers come and burn this town to the ground looking for that creature, don't say I didn't warn you." He wheeled his horse around and galloped back toward town. Sheriff Dawson watched him go, then sighed. "Silas is going to be a problem. He's scared, and scared men do stupid things. We need to figure out how to manage this situation before it manages us. I have an idea, Doc Harrison said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to look at the old physician. Jack, you said you can heal people now. What if you could help others the way you helped Billy? Lord knows this town has enough sick and injured folks. If people see the good you can do, maybe they'll be less afraid of how you do it. Jack felt Sarah's approval through their bond. I'll help anyone who needs it, he said. But I can't control when or how these abilities work. I'm still learning. Then we learn together, Tom Morrison said. And Sarah, if she's willing, maybe she can teach us things. Knowledge from other worlds. Maybe that's worth more than all the gold that used to be in these mines. The crowd began to disperse, not entirely comfortable, but willing to give Jack and Sarah a chance. Only Sheriff Dawson remained behind. Jack, he said seriously, I meant what I said about the government. If word gets out, there will be consequences. You need to be prepared for that. I know, Jack replied. But I couldn't let her die in that wreckage. And I can't turn my back on these abilities now that I have them. If I can help people, I will. The sheriff nodded slowly. Just remember, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And miracles have a way of attracting attention, whether you want it or not. As the sheriff rode away, Jack turned to find Sarah had resumed her natural appearance, her scales shimmering in the afternoon sun. Through their bond, he felt her gratitude and her concern. They had won a temporary reprieve, but both of them knew this was only the beginning. That night, as Jack lay awake in his chair, and Sarah meditated by the fireplace in the way of her people, neither of them noticed the rider watching from the hills above the cabin. Silas Blackwood sat on his horse, staring down at the glowing windows, his face twisted with fear and determination. He knew people in Santa Fe, people with connections to the territorial government and the military. And by morning, he planned to send them a telegram that would change everything. The miracle of Redemption Falls was about to become its greatest crisis. 3 days passed in relative peace, but it was the kind of peace that precedes a storm. Jack spent his days cautiously using his new abilities to help people in town, always with Doc Harrison present as a witness and guide. He healed old Mrs. Patterson's arthritis, restored sight to a miner who'd been partially blinded in an accident, and even mended a broken leg for young Timothy Wells that had been healing crooked. Each healing was a miracle, and word spread not outside Redemption Falls, but within it, binding the community together in shared wonder and secret. People who have been skeptical became believers. Those who had been afraid found courage in the concrete good that Jack was doing. Sarah, meanwhile, had become something of a sensation among the children of the town. Billy Morrison had appointed himself her protector and guide, teaching her English words and showing her how things worked in human society. She learned quickly, her intelligence far surpassing human norms, and within those 3 days she could speak in halting but understandable sentences. She also began to teach. In the evening, she would gather anyone interested in the town square and share knowledge of the stars, drawing maps in the dirt of constellations and explaining concepts of astronomy that wouldn't be discovered by human science for decades. She spoke of her people, the Sakura, a civilization millions of years old that had chosen exploration and study over conquest and expansion. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like Redemption Falls might truly become a bridge between worlds, a place where human and alien could coexist in harmony. Then the soldiers came. They arrived on the 4th morning, 24 cavalry troops, led by a captain named James Merrick, a hard-faced man with cold eyes and an air of absolute authority. They rode in formation down the main street, their blue uniforms dusty from travel, their rifles prominently displayed. Sheriff Dawson met them in front of his office, his hand instinctively moving toward his pistol, but stopping before touching it. He knew resistance would be futile. "Captain," Dawson said carefully, "this is unexpected. What brings the army to Redemption Falls?" "You know why we're here, Sheriff," Merrick replied, his voice clipped and professional. "We received a report about an unidentified craft crash and possible hostile entities in the area. I'm here to investigate and, if necessary, contain the situation." "There's no situation to contain," Dawson said, but his words lacked conviction. "Just a small town going about its business." Captain Merrick dismounted, his boots hitting the dust with authority. "Don't insult my intelligence, Sheriff. We know about the creature. We know about the townsman who's been exhibiting impossible abilities. And we have orders to bring both of them in for study and containment." He paused, his eyes scanning the gathering crowd. "Where's Jack Thornton?" The townspeople had begun emerging from buildings, forming a protective circle around the soldiers. There was a tension in the air that felt explosive, like lightning about to strike. "Jack's done nothing wrong," Mrs. Chun called out from the doorway of her store. "He's been helping people." "That's not your determination to make, ma'am," Merrick responded. "This is a matter of national security. Now, I'll ask one more time, where is Jack Thornton and the extraterrestrial entity?" Jack's voice came from behind the soldiers, causing several to spin around with their rifles raised. "I'm right here, Captain. And Sarah's with me." He stood at the end of the main street, Sarah beside him in her more human appearance, though her amber eyes still marked her as different. They walked forward slowly, hands visible and empty, showing no threat. But Jack could feel the energy humming through his body, ready to be used if necessary. "Mr. Thornton," Captain Merrick said, his hand moving to his sidearm, "you and your companion need to come with us, peacefully, if possible. And if we refuse," Jack asked, though he already knew the answer, "then we will use force. We have authorization from the territorial governor and the War Department. You have no legal standing to resist." Sarah placed her hand on Jack's arm, and through their connection, he felt her calculation. She was assessing the soldiers' weapons, their formations, their threat level. She could disable them all in seconds. Her People-S technology had given her defensive capabilities far beyond human military force. But Jack felt her hesitation, her desire to avoid violence. Captain Merrick, Pastor Wesley stepped forward, his Bible clutched in his hands. "These people have done no harm. In fact, they've done only good. Jack has healed the sick, given hope to the hopeless. Sarah has shared knowledge freely. What crime have they committed that warrants military action?" "The existence of an alien being on American soil is itself a matter requiring federal intervention," Merrick replied. "We don't know its intentions, its capabilities, or what threats it might pose. And Mr. Thornton has been exposed to unknown energies that have altered his biology. Both need to be studied. We're not laboratory specimens," Jack said firmly. "We're living beings with rights and dignity. You gave up those rights when you became something other than human," Merrick said coldly. "Now come peacefully, or my men will open fire. And before you think about using whatever powers you have, remember that there are innocent townspeople all around us. Any resistance from you puts them in danger." It was a perfect trap, and Jack knew it. If he fought, people would die in the crossfire. If he surrendered, he and Sarah would disappear into some government facility, never to be seen again. Either way, the miracle of Redemption Falls would end in tragedy. But then something unexpected happened. Tom Morrison stepped forward, positioning himself between Jack and the soldiers. "If you wanted to take Jack, you'll have to go through me first." Doc Harrison joined him. "And me." Mrs. Chun came next, then Pastor Wesley, then Billy Morrison squirming past his grandmother's restraining hands. One by one, the townspeople of Redemption Falls formed a human barrier between the soldiers and Jack and Sarah. Nearly 100 people, old and young, armed and unarmed, united in defiance. "Stand aside," Captain Merrick ordered, his voice rising. "This is your last warning. Stand aside or face charges of interfering with military operations." "Then charge us all," Sheriff Dawson said, moving to stand at the front of the crowd. He removed his badge and let it fall to the dust. "Because if you want Jack and Sarah, you'll have to arrest the entire town. And I don't think even the War Department wants that kind of publicity." Captain Merrick's face flushed with anger and frustration. Jack could sense the captain's conflict. He had orders, but he also had a conscience. The man hadn't expected this level of resistance from a dying frontier town. Sarah suddenly stepped forward, moving past the protective barrier of townspeople. She had been observing, calculating, and now she had a plan. She approached Captain Merrick directly, and though several soldiers raised their rifles, she showed no fear. "Captain Merrick," she said, her accent still heavy but her words clear, "I understand your fear. Your people have never encountered my kind before. You don't know if we are friend or threat. This is reasonable concern." Merrick stared at her, clearly unsettled by her direct approach and her ability to speak English. "The creature talks," he muttered. "I am not creature," Sarah continued, her amber eyes fixed on his. "I am Sakara. I am explorer, scientist, survivor of accident. I crashed here by misfortune, not by invasion design. And Jack Thornton saved my life when he could have left me to die. This says much about human potential for compassion." She held out her hand, palm up, and a small sphere of light formed above it, pure energy shaped by thought, harmless but demonstrating her capabilities. Several soldiers gasped, and Merrick's hand tightened on his pistol. "I could fight you," Sarah said simply. "My people's technology and abilities are far beyond yours. I could disable every weapon here without harming a single person. But I choose not to because violence creates only more violence. Instead, I make offer." "What kind of offer?" Merrick asked suspiciously. "Give us 1 month," Sarah said. "Let us stay in Redemption Falls, under observation, if you wish. Send scientists, not soldiers. Let them study what happened, what Jack and I can do. Let them learn. And at end of month, if we have proven to be threat, I will go with you peacefully. Jack too, if he chooses. But if we prove to be benefit, to be allies, then you leave us in peace." It was a brilliant gambit. Jack felt his heart swell with admiration for Sarah's quick thinking. She was offering the government exactly what they wanted: access to alien technology and knowledge, while buying time and avoiding immediate violence. Captain Merrick was silent for a long moment, clearly considering the offer. "I don't have authority to make that kind of agreement," he finally said. "Then contact those who do," Sheriff Dawson interjected. "We have a telegraph office. Send your superiors Sarah's proposal. See what they say. Because I'll tell you right now, Captain, you won't take these two without bloodshed, and I don't think any of us want that." The standoff stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Jack had sensed the captain's mind working, weighing options, considering consequences. Finally, Merrick nodded slowly. "I'll telegraph my commanding officer, but my men and I will be staying in town, watching you both. If you make any attempt to leave, if you do anything suspicious, we will act. Understood?" "Understood," Jack said, relief flooding through him. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a reprieve. The crowd began to disperse, but the unity they'd shown remained palpable. They had stood together against federal authority to protect their own, and that bond would not be easily broken. That night, as Captain Merrick sent his telegrams and his soldiers made camp on the outskirts of town, Jack and Sarah sat together on his porch, watching the stars. "You saved us today," Jack said quietly. That was brilliant thinking. Sarah's scales rippled with what Jack had learned was her version of a humble smile. "We saved each other," she corrected. "You gave me life. These people gave me family. I give them time to understand. This is how bridges are built between worlds. What if they don't accept your offer? What if in a month they still want to take us?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, then pointed up at the night sky. "My people are saying The stars are patient because they know all fear eventually transforms into wonder. We have months to show humans that different does not mean dangerous. We have months to plant seeds of understanding that will grow long after we are gone. You think we'll have to leave, don't you? Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. I think change is inevitable, Sarah said. But what matters is what we leave behind. If we can show this town, these soldiers, that cooperation between species is possible, that compassion transcends origin, then maybe we save more than just ourselves. Maybe we save future. Jack took her three-fingered hand in his, marveling again at how natural the gesture felt, despite their biological differences. Then we better make this month count. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, perhaps a piece of debris from Sarah's ship, still burning up in the atmosphere. Or perhaps just a coincidence, a reminder that the universe was vast and full of possibilities, and that Redemption Falls had become a place where impossible things were now everyday miracles. The month ahead would be challenging. Government scientists would arrive, asking questions, running tests, pushing boundaries. The townspeople would need to maintain their unity in the face of outside pressure. And Jack and Sarah would need to prove that the bond between human and alien could be one of mutual benefit, not threat. But as they sat together under the stars, both of them felt something that transcended species and circumstance: hope. Hope that understanding could triumph over fear, that compassion could bridge the gap between worlds, and that Redemption Falls might truly become the place where humanity took its first real step toward the stars. The transformation was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. The month that followed tested every resident of Redemption Falls in ways they could never have anticipated. True to Captain Merrick's word, the government sent scientists, a team of 5 researchers from various disciplines, led by a brilliant but skeptical woman named Dr. Elizabeth Grant. She was a physicist from the East Coast who viewed Sarah and Jack as fascinating puzzles to be solved rather than threats to be contained. The scientists set up a makeshift laboratory in the old mining company headquarters, bringing equipment that seemed impossibly advanced to the townspeople. They ran tests on Jack and Sarah daily, measuring brain activity, taking tissue samples, analyzing the energy signatures that both of them now emitted. Sarah cooperated fully, understanding that data and proof were the languages that would ultimately protect them. But the real transformation happened not in the laboratory, but in the everyday interactions between alien and human. Sarah began teaching classes in the old schoolhouse. Children and adults alike gathered to hear her speak about physics principles that wouldn't be discovered on Earth for generations, about biology and evolution across different worlds, about philosophy and art as practiced by civilizations far older than human history. She spoke of her planet, showing them sketches she'd drawn of crystalline cities that grew like organic things, of forests where trees communicated through bioluminescent signals, of an ocean that sang with the collective consciousness of billions of simple organisms working as one. Jack, meanwhile, worked with Doc Harrison to refine his healing abilities. They discovered that he could not only cure physical ailments but also diagnose them with uncanny accuracy. He could sense the early stages of diseases that wouldn't show symptoms for years, allowing for preventive treatment. He helped deliver a baby with complications that would have killed both mother and child without his intervention. He even managed to slow the progression of old Ben Carter's cancer, giving the man months more of quality life than he would have had otherwise. The townspeople thrived under their influence. Crops that had been failing due to depleted soil began to flourish after Sarah showed the farmers techniques for soil regeneration used on her world. The old mine, long thought tapped out, revealed new veins of ore when Sarah used her people's scanning technology to map the underground formations. Children who'd been expected to leave for lack of opportunity began seeing futures in Redemption Falls as scientists, as teachers, as bridges between the old ways and new possibilities. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Silas Blackwood, had become increasingly isolated as his predictions of doom failed to materialize. His ranch hands began leaving to work in the revitalized mines or to study with Sarah. His influence in town waned as others rose to prominence, and his fear curdled into something darker, hatred mixed with desperation. On the 28th day of the agreed-upon month, he made his move. Jack was in the town square, helping to set up for a celebration, a feast to mark the end of the trial period and, hopefully, the official acceptance of Sarah into the community. She was nearby, teaching a group of children how to make simple harmonic patterns with colored sand, a form of artistic expression from her world. Silas approached from the direction of his ranch, but he wasn't alone. He'd hired gunmen from Santa Fe, hard men who cared nothing for the people of Redemption Falls and everything for the money Blackwood was paying them. There were 8 of them, all armed, all ready for violence. "Thornton," Silas called out, his voice carrying across the square. The celebration preparations stopped immediately as people turned to look. Jack stood slowly, already sensing the danger. Through his enhanced abilities, he could feel the murderous intent radiating from the gunman, the desperate rage from Silas. "Blackwood, what's this about?" "It's about ending the corruption you've brought to this town," Silas shouted. "You and that demon have poisoned everyone's minds with your tricks and lies. Well, I'm here to set things right." Sheriff Dawson, who had been helping hang decorations, moved toward his office where his rifle was stored, but one of the gunmen blocked his path. Captain Merrick and his soldiers were at the camp outside town, too far away to intervene quickly. "Silas, don't do this," Tom Morrison pleaded, stepping forward. "Whatever you think is happening, this isn't the answer." "Stay out of this, Tom," Silas snarled. "The rest of you, too. This doesn't concern anyone but me, Thornton, and that thing pretending to be human." Sarah rose from where she'd been sitting with the children, her form shifting back to her natural appearance, a deliberate choice to stand openly as herself in this moment. The children behind her were frightened, but Billy Morrison stayed close to her, his small hand gripping hers. "I am not Thing," Sarah said calmly. "I am Sakara, and I have harmed no one." "Why this hate, Silas Blackwood?" "Because you're destroying everything." Silas's voice cracked with emotion. This town was dying. Yes, but it was our town. Human town. And now you're changing it, making it into something else, something wrong. People are forgetting how things should be, getting ideas above their station. It needs to stop. Jack understood then. This wasn't really about Sarah being alien or about the changes themselves. It was about Silas losing control, losing relevance, losing the world he understood. It was fear of obsolescence wrapped in the language of righteousness. "Silas," Jack said gently, "change is frightening. I understand that. But the town wasn't dying because it was meant to. It was dying because we de-exhausted the old ways without finding new ones. Sarah isn't destroying Redemption Falls. She's giving it a future. A future as what? A freak show? A laboratory for government scientists. We were free before you brought that creature here. Free to die slowly," Doc Harrison called out. "Free to watch our children leave for lack of opportunity. Free to become a ghost town forgotten by history. Is that really better than what we have now?" The gunmen were getting restless, hands hovering near their weapons. The situation was seconds away from violence. Sarah made a decision. She gently pushed Billy behind her and stepped forward, placing herself directly in the line of fire. "If my presence causes such pain," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "then I will leave. I do not wish to be source of conflict. This town has given me much. I will not repay kindness with bloodshed." "No!" The cry came from multiple voices. Billy, Mrs. Chen, Pastor Wesley, and dozens of others. "You're not going anywhere." "She's right that she needs to leave," Silas said, his hand dropping to his gun. "But not alive. Can't risk her bringing more of her kind. Boys, What happened next occurred in the space of a heartbeat. The gunmen drew their weapons. Jack's hands began to glow as he prepared to shield Sarah and the children. Sarah's body erupted with defensive energy fields. And from the crowd, townspeople surged forward despite the danger, ready to throw themselves between bullets and the two beings they'd come to love. But the shots never came. A blue-white light exploded from above, and suddenly Captain Merrick and his soldiers were there, having ridden hard from their camp at the first signs of trouble. They'd surrounded the gunmen, rifles pointed, a clear message that any violence would be met with overwhelming force. "Lower your weapons," Merrick commanded. "All of you. This is a federal matter, and I will not tolerate vigilante action." The hired guns, seeing themselves outmanned and outgunned by military professionals, slowly holstered their pistols. Silas Blackwood deflated like a punctured balloon, his grand plan crumbling before his eyes. But then, unexpectedly, Captain Merrick holstered his own weapon and walked directly up to Sarah. For a moment, everyone held their breath, uncertain what would happen. The captain studied her face, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing past the alien features to the person beneath. "I received a response to my telegrams yesterday," Merrick said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "From Washington, from the War Department, the Department of Interior, and even from the President's office." He paused, and Jack saw something that might have been respect in his eyes. "They've reviewed Dr. Grant's reports. They've read the testimonials from this town. And they've made a decision." The square was silent enough to hear the wind rustling through the dust. "Sarah of the Sakara," Captain Merrick said formally, "you are hereby granted sanctuary on United States soil as the first official extraterrestrial ambassador to Earth. Jack Thornton, your abilities and actions have been deemed beneficial to public welfare. You're free to continue using them as you see fit, with the understanding that you'll cooperate with scientific study as needed." The square erupted in cheers. People embraced, cried, and celebrated. Sarah's scales rippled through a brilliant cascade of colors that Jack had learned meant overwhelming emotion, joy, relief, gratitude, all mixed together. Silas Blackwood, seeing his worst fears confirmed, that the alien would be accepted, that the world he knew was truly ending, turned and walked away, his hired guns trailing after him. He would leave Redemption Falls that night and never return, unable to adapt to the future that was being born. Dr. Elizabeth Grant emerged from the crowd, her professional demeanor cracking into a genuine smile. "I have to admit," she said to Sarah, "when I arrived here a month ago, I expected to find evidence of a threat. Instead, I found the most profound opportunity in human history, the chance to learn from another civilization without conquest or conflict. You've taught us as much about ourselves as about your people. We teach each other," Sarah corrected, her English now nearly perfect. "This is how it should be. Understanding flows both ways." That night, Redemption Falls held its celebration, and it was unlike anything the town had ever seen. Sarah taught them Skara songs that resonated in harmonics human voices couldn't quite achieve, but tried anyway. Jack demonstrated his healing abilities in ways both practical and beautiful, creating small lights that danced in the air like fireflies, drawing oohs and ahas from children. The government scientists mingled with townspeople, barriers of class and education falling away in shared wonder. As the celebration wound down and people began heading home, Jack and Sarah found themselves once again on his cabin porch, looking up at the stars. "What happens now?" Jack asked. "Washington wants you as an ambassador. They'll probably want you in the capital, in big cities where you can meet with important people." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "They want Sakar knowledge and technology. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. I think I stay here in Redemption Falls. I teach those who want to learn. I help this town become model for what human-alien cooperation can be. And when more of my people come, and they will come eventually, they will find here an example of what is possible." More are coming? Jack asked, though he wasn't surprised. My ship sent distress signal before it exploded. My people will have received it. In your years, perhaps 5 or 10, they will arrive to search for me. And when they do, they will find not a world that captured and studied one of their own, but a world that welcomed her. That will matter more than you know. Jack took her hand, marveling again at how natural the gesture had become. And what about me? What happens to the cowboy who pulled an alien from a burning wreck? Sarah's laugh was a series of melodious chimes. The cowboy becomes legend. The man who saved the Sakara and changed his world. Your name will be remembered on my planet and yours. But more important, ... She squeezed his hand. The cowboy becomes teacher too. You show others that accepting change does not mean losing yourself. You show them that human heart big enough to embrace stars. In the months and years that followed, Redemption Falls did indeed become a model. Scientists came from around the world to study Sarah and the changes she'd brought. The town grew, but never lost its character, carefully managing its transformation into something new while honoring what it had been. Children who learned from Sarah went on to become leaders in fields that didn't even exist yet: xenobiology, interstellar anthropology, cross-species communication. Jack continued his work as a healer, but more importantly, as a bridge between the fearful and the hopeful. He traveled to other towns, other cities, speaking about his experience and helping people understand that the universe was larger and stranger than they'd imagined, but no less wondrous for that. And when the Sakara ship finally arrived, landing in Dead Man's Canyon where Sarah's craft had crashed a decade earlier, they found a welcoming committee of thousands. Humans and the one Sakara who'd chosen to make Earth her home, waiting together with open hands and open hearts. The visitors were amazed. In all their millions of years of exploration, they rarely found species that could so quickly adapt to the reality of other intelligent life. Most went through decades or centuries of conflict and adjustment. But humanity, with all its flaws and fears, had something special in adaptability born of diversity, a curiosity stronger than xenophobia, and individuals capable of extraordinary compassion. Sarah stood with Jack as the ships landed, her scales shimmering with colors that signified coming home while remaining home, a paradox that only those who decrossed the bridge between worlds could truly understand. You did this, Jack said, watching the magnificent vessels settle onto Earth soil. You changed everything. No, Sarah corrected, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. We did this. A poor cowboy who chose kindness over fear, and a lost alien who chose to trust. Two individuals who showed that bridges between worlds start with single acts of compassion. And, in that moment, as human and Sakara greeted each other beneath an endless sky, Redemption Falls lived up to its name, becoming a place where the future and the past could meet, where the impossible became everyday, and where a town that had been dying found not just survival but purpose. The story of Jack Thornton and Sarah the Sakari would be told for generations on both their worlds, not as a tale of alien invasion or human conquest, but as something far more profound, a reminder that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or weapons or even knowledge. It's the simple, radical act of seeing someone different and choosing to help anyway. That's how bridges are built between worlds. One moment of courage, one act of compassion, one poor cowboy who saved an alien and discovered that in saving her, he'd saved himself and his entire town. And that, in the end, was the greatest miracle of all.